So I had a bit of an unusual childhood, and it's not because of those sweatpants my mom used to dress me in. I lived in a 2 by 2 mile compound surrounded by a 15-foot wall with barbed wire, and the entrance to this compound was guarded by armed vehicles and guards with AK-47s that always waved to the school bus as it left. I grew up on a military compound in the Middle East. I have blonde hair, blue eyes, and out in the city, I stood out like a sore thumb. Whenever my family went out, we would always have to take the bus because my dad was always working and my mom couldn't drive because by law, women were not allowed to. And at restaurants, the seating section was segregated between men and family because culturally, it was not acceptable for a woman to eat within the vicinity of a man who is not related or married to them. According to UNESCO, up to 2 in 10 women in Arab states are illiterate as of 2011. Growing up, I was exposed to a society that put people in boxes, which determined their very future and defined who they were based on something like their gender or the color of their skin. When I moved to Canada, it was supposed to be different. And it was, don't get me wrong. I mean, Canadian society is known to be accepting and encouraging of diversity. On the surface, it was very different, but the underlying issues were still there. We are so limited by who we are supposed to be and how we are supposed to act. We are held back by our identities. For example, if you are a boy, you cannot wear makeup to school without running the risk of being harassed and most definitely having your sexuality come into question. You will be put in a different box, and society will treat you differently because of it. So this begs the question, is it the identity itself that's limiting, or is it merely society's expectations and perception of that identity limiting? The answer is a little bit of both. Association of one trait with another helps create an identity. For example, upon hearing about a 6'3", 320-pound construction worker, we would immediately have a plethora of assumptions about this person's identity based on this information. Maybe it would immediately be assumed that this person is a man and fairly masculine, and this assumption would be built into how they think of themselves and become part of who they are. Over time, these chains of assumptions lead to clusters of traits that we call stereotypes, which in the general sense, are very difficult to deviate from. This is a great example of how our perception can greatly affect an identity. The traits that we cannot control should not affect the traits that we can control and better reflect who we truly are. And yet, they do. That same construction worker would be hesitant to try out new things that don't go with their expected identity, whether that's taking up a job as a makeup artist or getting involved in fashion. Expectations shape our behavior, and this isn't just me. In psychology, it's known as the rule of expectations, a well-documented phenomenon. In one study, girls who were told they would perform poorly on a test did, and in another, assembly line workers who were told their task was more complex gave up sooner. Expectation in our current society is a self-fulfilling prophecy. So what if these connections that we create between traits didn't exist? The possibilities for our own identities would be limitless. That same construction worker, no longer pressured into their expected identity, would feel more comfortable and therefore be more likely to explore who they truly are as a person, as an individual. It's strange to envision how different that person might be. While I'm using gender as a contemporary example, this idea of our identities limiting us is a universal concept found throughout the world. Look at racism, look at the cycle of poverty, the list goes on. Association of certain traits, whether that's biological sex, race, or even the sound of someone's voice, with other characteristics of a person, such as their ability to complete a task or level of intelligence, robs capable people of opportunity, as seen in many places around the world where a large portion of girls are not allowed to attend school for the simple fact that they are a girl. A common counter-argument to this whole idea is that stereotypes are based in truth, and therefore we should be making these connections. While I do not have the time to delve into the origin of stereotypes, I do want to say this. Stereotypes are self-fulfilling, and therefore self-perpetuating. As I said before, a stereotype can affect someone's identity to such a high degree that they begin to play into the stereotype, which in turn keeps it alive. It's really causation versus correlation. Now, the amazing thing about all this is that we can slowly change these stereotypes, and I would actually like to look to my childhood home for proof. This year, women in Saudi Arabia could drive for the first time. They were also allowed to enter sports stadiums and join the military, and though these things may seem trivial, they are massive steps towards changing the stereotypes revolving around women. The first time that I personally came across someone who was willing to cross these societal boundaries was last year. And with his permission, I would like to share his story. My best friend Hayden was in grade 9 when he transitioned from a girl to a boy. He braved the nasty remarks on the school bus and the misunderstanding of so many friends and relatives in order to be himself, to not be limited. The impact this had on me was profound, and I soon became a powerful advocate for not letting one aspect of our identity define who we are. This journey led me to becoming one of several British Columbian representatives at a national youth conference at the Canadian Parliament this February, where I had an amazing opportunity to speak to members of Parliament and senators about LGBT acceptance in schools and gender equality. There's a photo of me at the Senate, and as you can see, I'm in the back there, looking incredibly engaged. Later, I worked towards the launch of several provincial campaigns through the BC Youth Council, a platform that I founded with Hayden. These campaigns are aimed at increasing awareness and acceptance of different identities at school and in our communities. So, what does this all mean? Society has expectations of us. The implications of this universal concept can sometimes be very damaging. The idea of if we are this, then we must be that, not only affects our self-expression, but holds back so many people in terms of advancing their knowledge, growing their skill sets, and fulfilling their potential. Finally, our perception of an identity helps shape that identity. And this is where we have the power to make a difference. I am here to tell you that the limits of labels only exist because we let them. They're built up from our outlook on different identities. And if we are aware of the connections that we make between certain traits and others, then we can work towards reducing them and eventually completely eradicating the limits of labels. Thank you.